Jack Stockwell, now in my 31st year at K-Talk Radio and on the stream. So, a lot of things as usual to try to catch up on. Not the least of which is some of the latest research that's being published relative to the boosters. Not those people out trying to raise money for your fall football high school leagues. Not those boosters. The boosters they're still injecting people with, even though the overwhelming evidence as how incredibly dangerous these things are. And yet it goes on, continues on, and that is the power of propaganda and big pharma's money to make sure that they have complete control of your health destiny. All right, if you're just tuning in for the first time, I'm Dr. Jack Stockwell at ForbiddenDoctor.com. I practice in Salt Lake City, and just overwhelmed at the variety of symptomatic pictures that come walking into our office. And everything from seizures to serious migraines to digestive elimination problems, cardiovascular problems, sugar handling problems. We're making some good headway with our diabetic patients. And nervous system degenerative problems, especially with bilateral neuropathies and how we're able to get them to respond rather quickly without ever using any drugs. And that's the dangerous thing that we do, is that we don't use drugs. Dangerous in the sense that it's a constant, ongoing battery of evidence that most of what is afflicting mankind, especially in the United States, is simply the results of starvation. Excuse me. Just starvation, malnutrition, and the just unbelievable idiocy of trying to treat the symptoms of starvation with chemical poisons. That's kind of where we're at, and that's why the health situation of the average American citizen continues to worsen. It's why our children continue to increase in the number who have chronic diseases. And now I'm starting to see children who have more than one chronic disease. Not just allergies, but asthma. Not just asthma, but gut problems. And so I want to spend some time talking about that today. And also, I want to talk about the fraud of mega vitamins. The incredible relationship between the vitamins that are coming into America from China that have a lot of different companies' labels on them, but they're made in China, and they're just ground up rocks, and in many cases just chemical mixtures thrown together to mimic and slide in under the veil of what the FDA considers to be a vitamin. I was under an open window last night, and so I'm just a little bit congested, so bear with me. Those of you on the stream, if you're looking at the picture, you now can believe maybe I am of lizard orientation, because the green screen is not being completely cut out, and so I've got this green glow around my head. All right, so the first thing I want to hit here is this study that just came out. Very, very interesting. The hesitancy has risen substantially with COVID-19 vaccine debacle and the worsening autism epidemic. And the breaking news is that under 40% of expecting and young parents plan to fully immunize their children. Less than 4 out of 10 parents who are pregnant or young parents who already have children, less than 40% are planning on fully immunizing their children. This report from Vasudevan et al. It's published in JAMA's Network Open, the Journal of American Medical Association, Network Open. It was just published. And it says, the COVID-19 vaccine safety debacle has contributed to erosion in vaccine confidence. You imagine that. Additionally, the ever-increasing burden of vaccines, coinciding with exploding rates of autism spectrum disorder, are prompting parents to do their own research. The only thing I've called for the last 31 years on my health show at K-Talk. A report from Vasudevan et al. From a survey performed among expecting and young parents found shocking results. Less than 40% are expected to follow the full vaccine schedule. Conversely, 60% are going to delay, refuse, or are undecided on routine childhood vaccinations. So I'm looking at this scale here in front of me, but from the results, I want to mention what the results were, as opposed to what things were before COVID came out. Regarding the vaccine schedule and parents' intentions to follow it. So reading from this published report in JAMA's Open publication. Vaccine intentions during pregnancy and among parents of young children. A total of 174 pregnant participants surveyed age 30 years or older, 34 Hispanic, 17 non-Hispanic Black, 112 Hispanic White, and 1,765 parents aged 30 years or older, 300 Hispanic, non-Hispanic Black, non-Hispanic White completed the survey. And among the participants, 68 pregnancies were nulliparous, which means this is their first pregnancy. Approximately half of the participants had a bachelor's degree or higher. More participants were currently married, and they reside in urban or rural or suburban areas. And the proportions intending to accept or all accepting all recommended vaccines for children were similar among pregnant participants and parents. Now here's the good part. The proportion intending to refuse or refusing some or all vaccines for their child without delays was lowest among the nulliparous pregnant participants. The proportion intending to refuse some or all was the lowest percentage among people who were pregnant for the first time. Only 5 of 68 in this particular study said, no, we're not going to do it. Highest among parents, 33%. Among people who already had small children that were a part of this study, it was a much higher percentage of people who were not going to vaccinate, or at least not all the vaccinations. And uncertainty about, now this is different. It's one thing to say, are you going to or not going to? It's another thing, how confident do you feel about whether you should vaccinate or not vaccinate your child? What's your confidence level? Uncertainty among childhood vaccination was highest among nulliparous pregnant participants. Again, those who were pregnant for the first time. And lowest among parents of young children, 78 out of 1,765. So what does all that mean? Very simply, there is a giant shift from 95% of parents, whether they were, this was their first pregnancy or not, before the pandemic, the pre-pandemic years, greater than 95% had every intention of getting some, if not all, the vaccines. So independent media and scholarship on the harms of vaccination, I suppose, is what's improved the awareness of what is going on here. But this is significant. When you put all the numbers together, up to 70% aren't sure whether they want to do it again or not. And with the explosion of autism and the constant research that's flowing forward that there may be some poisoning taking place with vaccines and the incidence of everything from SIDS to full-blown autism, especially among those who've been vaccinated. Is there autism in the unvaccinated? Yeah, but a far, far lower percentage. And I saw an interesting report with RFK being interviewed when I think it was Colomo, and asked him, said something to the effect, well, surely it's because we're more aware of it. The reason that we have higher autism rates today is simply because we're more aware of autism. We didn't used to be aware of it. And he said, and then Kennedy said, and I think he said he's 71 years old. That's younger than me. He said he's at 71, he said, I don't remember any autism. And then he said, look around you. How many 71-year-old autistic people do you know? He used his own age as an example. How many 71-year-old autistic people do you know? And Cuomo said, well, yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point. Yeah, it's not that we're more aware of it. Are you aware of an autistic child when you go out shopping? In the mall, grocery stores, clothing stores, wherever else, on the playground? Can you tell the difference between an autistic and a non-autistic child? Well, of course you can. You don't have to have a medical degree or a degree in any other kind of health care field. You can see an autistic child when you see one. You can tell it. And some of them are just heartbreaking. The symptoms are so bad. We've taken care of many of these in the clinic, and many of these poor, unfortunate children in the past. Usually focusing on dietary changes, because if we can get them to stop eating the common foods that we eat as Americans that are constantly poisoning our systems, the overly processed and prepared foods, as opposed to what Mother Nature made. When they can get those foods out of their diet and move to a more keto-oriented diet, where there's good protein and good fats, as well as a good mixture between the plant and animal kingdom. On the design, on Mother Nature's menu, not the food manufacturers, we can get a very good improvement in the symptomatic picture of an autistic child. Excuse me. There is one autistic child in particular I'm taking care of who has just made tremendous progress. He's even starting to become verbal, nonverbal and screaming when I first started taking care of him a little over a year ago. And I see him about every 2 or 3 weeks. And I almost always have to work on him a little bit, not much, not like I had to in the beginning stages. But between what we're doing in the clinic and the dietary changes the parents have made, he is simply not the same child. Now, of all the autistic children we've taken care of, every single one had vaccines of some nature or another. And some, a lot of them, some just a few. But there wasn't one autistic child we've taken care of that was not previously vaccinated. Does that prove vaccinations cause autism? Of course not. But it's of a causative nature. You may want to look into it. You may want to stop them, the vaccines. Oh, there we go. I'm competing with K-Talk again. So, a giant shift prior to the whole COVID thing. More than 95% of new of first pregnant parents and parents of young children, whether they had two or more children, has shifted dramatically from 95% who used to say, yeah, we're gonna do some or all, if not all, and they get lined up right there on the day of birth in the hospital to get their hepatitis B shot, which is just utterly ridiculous. But they do this to train the parents to get the shots. As I have said many times, and you can go find this out for yourself, any reasonably good medical text level of human physiology, and you go to the immune system and start reading about how it develops from infancy through adulthood, and you will see the same thing in any of these books. The human body does not manufacture antibodies until about the 12th month of life. So why in the world would you be giving shots to children in the first year of life? To train the parents. To train the parents to bring the kids in for shots. That's what it's for. But it doesn't do the kids any good. In fact, it does them a lot of harm. And that's what RFK Jr. is beginning to reveal to everybody. But not just him. These other research outlets, that this thing from JAMA, Journal of American Medical Association, showing that as high as 70% in some categories are unsure. They didn't say they weren't going to. They were just unsure whether they were going to follow the vaccine schedule or not. And why is that the case? Well, because of the independent media's coverage of the harms of vaccination. Major media, MSM, is not going to cover it because they get paid off to put out the standard line that vaccines are safe and effective. Now, I don't want to hammer that too long, but another study that just came out published in, I don't know if your subscription is still good or not, for Frontiers in Cellular and Infection Microbiology. I know my subscription ran out. But even with symptoms, even without symptoms, the mRNA boosters trigger immune suppression, systemic inflammation, and blood clots. And so I found this particular study because it's just following people after their third booster, not the fact that they've got any of the vaccines or a first or a second booster. They followed, it was a 6-month study tracking 68 healthy young adults after having received the third dose of Pfizer's COVID-19 vaccines. Those were the only people allowed in the study. There was only 68, and they followed them for 6 months. And the findings revealed serious biological red flags emerging just 48 hours after post-vaccination, including acute systemic inflammation, coagulation abnormalities, and suppression of key immune factors. Those three things: systemic inflammation, blood clots, and suppression of the immune system. Now, I was talking to a very good friend of mine the other day whose wife cannot get out of bed. She's in bed 23 hours a day. The 1 hour she's out of bed is when she's struggling in the bathroom. She eats her meals in bed. She's in bed constantly. And I said, well, where is she on the vaccines? And she got another one about 2 to 3 weeks before her current condition hit. And I said, well, she was already sick. And he said, yeah. And I said, oh, for Pete's sake, man. One of the cardinal rules of vaccine theory, you don't vaccinate somebody that's sick. You absolutely do not inject someone who is sick with these chemicals. I said, we already know that these vaccines are immunosuppressive. They will suppress the immune response. And he says, well, that's what she's diagnosed with. And I said, what do you mean? She's diagnosed with immunosuppression syndrome. I didn't know whether to scream, break out in tears, slam the phone down on the counter. I just told him I was sorry. You don't vaccinate somebody that's sick. But there were mass vaccinations taking place 4 years ago, 5 years ago, when the vaccine showed up, of people who were sick with COVID. And now some of them are sicker than ever, and they call it long COVID, when we know it's vaccine damage. All right, this study here, published in Frontiers in Cellular and Infection Microbiology. I like the title, Frontiers. It was published 3 weeks ago, maybe. Immune and hematologic responses to the third dose of an mRNA COVID-19 vaccine, a 6-month longitudinal study. And what they found, C-reactive protein. When you do a standard blood panel, it usually includes CRP, C-reactive protein. It's a protein that is released during inflammatory processes. And there's a certain level where the CRP or the HSCRP, two different indicators, a certain level where there's going to be some C-reactive protein taking place in the system with normal, natural tissue turnover. But when CRP is high, then we know there's a lot of inflammation, cellular damage taking place because of the inflammation, and a release of this C-reactive protein. And so when they do the standard blood, they see elevated CRP, they know there's inflammation going on. Then one of the major immune strength indicators in a standard CBC, complete blood, when you do a complete blood panel, you'll see the cells, the white blood cells, usually starting with the neutrophils. The neutrophils are the primary white blood cells as far as count is concerned. And it's your first line of defense against invasion of bacteria or whatever else. And when you see in the blood a decrease in the white blood cells, then there's some suppressive action taking place in the immune system. If you don't know anything other than, hey, what's his blood showing? Well, his white blood cells, his leukocytes are down. Well, how far down? Well, they should be, somewhere around 3,000 to 5,000. It's down to 1,000. Is he sick? Well, he doesn't look exactly well, but I wouldn't call him sick. Well, just wait a few days. And then the blood clotting, one of the biggest indicators, and it's not in the complete blood count. It's not in a standard blood panel. You have to ask for it. A D-dimer test. I had a very close friend of mine at 60 or 50 years old get a heart attack 2 weeks ago. At 50. And I think I talked about it last week, and thank the heavens he survived. He says he can still feel, he knows something happened to him because he can still feel something going on. They took him into the cardiac lab expecting to give him some stents. And after the exam, stress test, and the following angiogram, they found one tiny little blocked vessel at the very bottom of the myocardium. And they said, well, you don't need a stent for this. We're just going to treat it with medication. And they watched him for a little while longer and sent him home. And I said, well, did you do a D-dimer test? He said, no, they didn't do that. Because you have to ask for that. So those 3 tests, if your CRP is elevated, you know there's inflammation. If your white blood cells have dropped, you know there's some kind of an immune suppression taking place. And if the D-dimer is elevated, then you know there's some clotting taking place. These are pillars of blood exam work. I mean, You can't come to some other conclusion when these numbers are off the normal spread that they should be. So, what happened with these 68 adults? Within 48 hours of the third dose, and again, if you're just tuning in, thanks, Paul. There's one going on now. Yeah, the 100 radio shows. We don't want to miss that, for Pete's sake. Sorry, those of you on the stream, of my little side commentaries here about what's going on at K-Talk. Anyway, back to what I was saying. Just the stream is listening to me now. These three tests. C-reactive protein, if it's elevated, you know there's inflammation taking place. If the lymphocyte counts have dropped significantly, you know that there is some immune suppression taking place for some reason. And then again, with a D-dimer, and a lot of times what they'll do with the coagulation profile, it's not just D-dimer, but they'll do the coagulation profile as well, which simply means, thanks, Paul. It simply means that if the prothrombin time is prolonged, which is how long it takes for your blood to clot, then you know that there's some kind of vaccine-induced prothrombotic problem going on if it's in this group who had just received, within 48 hours, the third booster. That's the only people who were followed in this study. For 6 months after the third booster, they watched these people, but within 48 hours, 2 days, there was elevation of the inflammation markers, there was elevation of the clotting markers, and there was decreased immune response. Now, in the study, they would rule out any other causative factors that could be taking place, like some major surgery, a stroke, a heart attack, a serious diabetes flare-up, or threatening with insulin coma or diabetic shock or something, or I said those backwards, insulin shock or diabetic coma, or any of these other kinds of things that could have affected any of these markers 48 hours after the shot. So when research like this comes forward, it gets very difficult to argue this stuff. And when it's printed in Frontiers in Cellular and Infection Microbiology, as I said, your subscription to that may have run out, but nonetheless, you know how respected a peer-reviewed journal that is. When it shows up in studies like this, 3-4 years ago, they would never publish these things because of the power of Big Pharma to stop this stuff from getting into the news. And remember, Big Pharma, it doesn't exist to make you healthy. Big Pharma wants to sign you up to the club so that you'll be dependent upon them the rest of your life to manage your symptoms. You can't make money off of getting rid of people's symptoms. Their symptoms have to be maintained. So I was watching one of these semaglutide commercials, and the guy just kind of slapping his thigh, and yeah, I'll probably be on this for life because I feel so good, and I've lost 36 pounds. Well, that's the end goal. I could get a little silly here and say, well, that's the object of the food industry, to get you hooked on food. That's kind of silly. I'm hooked on food. So, why does this matter? Why does this study matter? Well, documenting early immune suppression and clotting activity occurring simultaneously within 48 hours of the third mRNA dose in young, healthy adults. These 68 people were screened carefully. They didn't let anybody sick in there. They weren't supermen and superwomen, but they were healthy adults, not showing any kind of markers otherwise that would indicate that they're diabetic or asthma or serious digestive problems or whatever else. They were considered healthy people following a screening. Within 48 hours of the third booster, immune suppression and blood clots started. And it reinforces the biological plausibility behind the serious adverse events like myocarditis, immune dysregulation, and blood clotting complications. And then the challenge, the notion of mild reactions, showing that even in the absence of overt symptoms, like passing out, 2 minutes after you get the shot, or the onset of seizures, or these kinds of just fainting or whatever else. In the absence of all of that, the mRNA boosters can trigger these hidden but dangerous disruption in inflammation, coagulation, and immune function, and published in a recognized, respected, peer-reviewed journal. Now that's significant. Now, I think I've hammered that one hard enough. I want to remind you of my Dr. Jack's Packs for a few moments here before I get into the war against religious exemptions and your rights as a parent. It's that there are states right now trying to pass laws that will no longer allow a religious exemption for vaccinations. But first, I want to mention Dr. Jack's Packs. The one that we seem to be moving the most is the heart support and the immune cold flu support and digestion support, the foundational protocol, the one that you take to keep you from getting sick, and female support in the sense of helping to maintain hormonal balance. But the one that we see the most being sold is the heart support. It's just three supplements: the Cataplex B Core, the Cardio Plus, and Cardiotrophin, the protomorphogen that stops inflammation in the heart. I take this every morning. I don't even know how long I've been taking this. Someone said, "Are you going to take it the rest of your life?" Probably. I probably will. This is, what do we have here? The very end of July, August, September, 3 months, I'll be 75. Well, I'm in the 75th year, so I kind of think I'm 75 already. When my birthday rolls around, it's just the beginning of the 76th year of life. And I feel pretty good. I plenty of energy to get through the day with my patients. I have become wildly aware of my dietary intake. And I've noticed little cheats here and there that I've been doing in the sense of sugary stuff, that one by one I'm cutting them out. It's not easy. I understand that. It's rather downright difficult, in fact. But I'm cutting out more and more of anything that would cause inflammation in my system. And sugar is probably the most common inflammatory material that we consume. And it's a drug. I don't think of sugar as a sugar, although that's exactly what it is. I think more of sugar as a drug because it has absolutely no nutritive value. There's no nutrition in sugar whatsoever. There is in cane, sugar cane, if you chew on a sugar cane. There is nutrition there. There's vitamins, there's minerals, there's enzymes because it's a living plant. What about a sweet potato? that has sugar in it? Yeah, it's got a lot of carotenoids. That's why it's orange. And it has minerals. If it's been raised in a field that has minerals in it, and that's the problem with most commercial food production today, that these things are being grown in vitality empty soils. And as Dr. Royal Lee used to say, if there's no vitality in the ground or the soil, there's no vitality in the bottle. If your foods are coming from commercially fertilized vegetable farms, they're pretty empty. They're usually pretty empty. And although the tomato looks red, the green pepper looks green, the carrot looks orange, it only takes a couple of minerals to make that happen. Even the synthetic forms of those minerals can make a carrot as orange as a harvest moon. And a green pepper as green as the shamrocks of Ireland. But they can still be empty. And when you walk through the produce section of a grocery store and you look at the variety of vegetables and on display there, if they came from commercial farms, they're nutritionally pretty well empty, except for the carbohydrate that's present. You want something nutritious, you have to get organic. Organic doesn't just mean that they're grown without pesticides. The condition of the soil has an awful lot to do with an organic listing by the USDA. In other words, they have to be using natural fertilizers, composting, animal fertilizers. They can't be using any chemical fertilizers. So that's why sometimes if you look at a tub of organic strawberries next to a tub of commercial strawberries, the commercial strawberries will look better. They'll be brighter in color. They'll be a little bit bigger. The same reason that a calf that becomes a steer and is raised for steaks and hamburgers will be bigger at the time of processing than a grass pastured calf that became a steer for steaks and hamburgers, because of all the drugs that are pumped into that commercial animal to fatten them up. Same thing with a farm-raised chicken as opposed to the chicken that you get at Kentucky Fried or the chicken that you get in grocery stores, where you're looking at that drumstick and you don't know if that came from a chicken or a turkey. The thing is so big. Gigantic chicken thighs, gigantic chicken legs, because of all the drugs that are pumped in there. Well, the same thing with vegetables that come from commercial farms. Beautiful green, beautiful red, beautiful orange, because of the chemicals that are put into that minerally depleted soil, giving them beautiful colors, but empty as far as nutrition is concerned. And that's why most of the people that I take care of, outside of structural problems, are starving to death. And when I finally get enough time to explain all these things to them, which I hardly ever have time to do in a normal clinical setting, they start to get the picture. You've been sold a bill of goods. You've been fooled by ConAgra and the rest of them. And the same thing comes around with most of the aspects of our lifestyle, including vaccinations. Now, the American Academy of Pediatrics is going to war against your religious exemption. Now, the American Academy of Pediatrics was bought out a long time ago. Not every pediatrician is a member of the American Academy. How far do I want to go with this? The ability to practice one's sincere religious beliefs is woven into the very fabric of America. And its founding ethos, right there in the middle of all of that. Yet the American Academy of Pediatrics, a membership organization, of course, focusing on pediatricians, just declared war on your ability to think and act upon what you think, especially when it comes to your children. besides being morally objectionable, this concept is just plain unpopular in modern America. By 2023, only 6 U.S. states officially denied parents religious exemptions to the vaccination of their children via laws that were enacted in the face of massive opposition from the public. Despite the fact that there were huge numbers of parents showing up before these legislative bodies to allow them religious exemptions, their state legislatures went ahead and passed these draconian laws that removed from the parents the right to deny the vaccination based on religion. Since then, 2 of those states, Mississippi and West Virginia, have seen their religious denial laws overturned by court wins from the Informed Consent Action Network's legal team, in which judges deemed such laws to violate the First Amendment. So public pushback saw Hawaii as the last state to defeat a bill that would have removed its religious exemption option. So now, what is the American Academy of Pediatrics going to do in light of the fact that state after state is now dropping the opposition to religious exemptions? Their new policy paper just came out in an attempt to bring to an end religious freedom in the medical and the public health space, an idea, thank the heavens, has finally come. I'm quoting from the American Academy of Pediatrics. The AAP recommends that all states, territories, and the District of Columbia eliminate all non-medical exemptions from immunizations as a condition of school attendance. Well, you know who they work for. So I'm quoting here from this news release. With a flowery mission to obtain optimal physical, mental, and social health and well-being for all infants, children, adolescents, and young adults, the AAP fashions itself more as a continuous pipeline for industry products through overreaching and anti-science edicts. So they recently floated, the AAP, the American Academy of Pediatrics, recently floated a lawsuit against Bobby Kennedy Jr. for his recommendation to remove pregnant women and healthy children from the COVID vaccine schedule. And it's difficult to find outside of people like Paul Offit and doctors of his ilk that will defend giving a healthy child a COVID shot, when during COVID, they were the least group, you know, in percentages of like with 4 zeros in the number of children who were affected by COVID, 0.0004 or something like that. And so Kennedy said, well, why inject them with this stuff? They don't get COVID anyway. And if they do, it's just a runny nose for a couple days. And so the American Academy of Pediatrics is suing him for his recommendation to take pregnant women and healthy children off of the COVID vaccine schedule. So if you look at some of the AAP's greatest hits over the last 5 years, 2019 Washington, D.C.'s, their bill 230171 sought to aid a new section into the existing regulations that would allow a minor child to consent to receive a vaccine. Now, you know what that means. For a minor child to consent. The news release here contained the bill and its hearing signaled a new high water mark towards the removal of parents from some of their children's most important medical decisions, and the AAP was there behind it. During the public hearing, before it was signed into law, pediatrician Dr. Helene Fellman, representing Washington, D.C.'s chapter of the American Academy of Pediatrics, said, "As a pediatrician, I like the legislation as it stands because it offers the opportunity to capture those young adults who can make informed decisions at technically any age." Can a third grader make a technically based informed consent? How are they going to do that? They probably haven't even read their first peer-reviewed research report by the time they're in the third grade. And ICAN, Legal Victory Halting DC's Overreach, saw a DC district judge issue a preliminary injunction against the act in favor of parents who brought the suit. The parents filed complaints and were able to demonstrate the act likely violates federal law. Probably does. But aside from that, what's going on here behind the scenes? What's really taking place here? Where in the world does the American Academy of Pediatrics get off with their representative in Washington, D.C., coming out and saying, at any age, minors can, through technology, make an informed consent on their own without their parents' interference? What's really going on here? Next up, the AAP was on the wrong side of the push against clear scientific evidence to medically transition children. So I suppose the same doctor that thinks a third grader can make an informed consent decision about getting a vaccine can also make an informed decision to have their genitals cut off, their breasts cut off, and start hormonal therapy to become the other sex. Norway, Sweden, Denmark, UK, and other countries officially have backed off of that practice by now. And a 2025 review of HHS of the evidence and best practices found significant risks associated with gender dysphoria treatments. And one of the authors of that paper stated simply, no reliable research indicates that these treatments are beneficial to minors' mental health. And the AAP was there, supporting it. Another one, finally, because we're coming to the top of the hour here. Because the AAP is now advocating for injectable weight loss drugs for children. You know, the semaglutide and tirzepatide have a age limitation. I think it's 18. And now they want to lower the age because, well, it's a bigger market. This is AAP. Children struggling with obesity should be evaluated and treated early and aggressively, including medications for children as young as 12, and surgery for those as young as 13, according to new guidelines released Monday. It's just really cool how they word these things. New guidelines. New guidelines from where? From the American Academy of Pediatrics. You know, 50 years ago, when I was deciding what direction I wanted to go in healthcare, medicine or alternative, in my early 20s, I thought that pediatrics was probably one of the most noble things a medical doctor could be involved with. And how I have changed my mind on that premise 50 years later. Well, it didn't take 50 years. So a question that often comes up to my staff when they call in, does Dr. Stockwell have a pediatrician to recommend? I'd like to have my child examined. And this is the answer. No, Dr. Jack doesn't recommend any pediatricians. However, he does recommend this. if you have a particular pediatrician you're interested in, or for no other reason than geographical, one in your neighborhood, call the office. Talk to the front counter people who answer the phone, because the pediatrician isn't going to, and ask them, does will Dr. So-and-so have a problem with me having my children becoming part of his practice if we don't vaccinate? That's all you got to ask. And they'll say one of two things. Oh, he will not accept a new patient without vaccination. Or they'll say something almost from the throne of heaven. Dr. So-and-so respects the parents' decision regarding vaccinations of their children and does not require it to become a part of his practice. Oh, well, that's who I would take my child to if I thought my child needed a pediatrician. So I think that makes that a lot simpler, a lot easier to understand. We're going to go to break here very quickly. There's two wonderful things I want to talk to you about. What they've discovered about handwriting. Yeah, they did these studies on college students during lectures, and part of the group took notes by handwriting. The other half of the study took notes with the keyboard on their laptops. What a difference of what happened inside the brain during these experiences and how it could relate to your personal life. And then also, the thing I want to start with, has Big Pharma hacked the vitamin industry? Of course they have. That's what I want to talk about. What Big Pharma has done to destroy the vitamin industry. And we'll get to that at the beginning of the next hour. I got a couple of little tidbits for the people who are on the stream during the coming break, where I believe K-Talk will end up going to the top of the hour news and station identification. And then when we get back, I want to get into the vitamin thing first, because what is happening in this country in the vitamin industry, in my opinion, is just as disgusting as what is happening throughout all of Big Pharma. And most of the vitamins in the marketplace out there now, not all, but most of them, they're all being manufactured by Big Pharma. Big Pharma saw what happened at the beginning of the alternative healthcare industry, which is attributed somewhere in the early 1980s to mid 1980s, and the explosion that has occurred since then, and how Big Pharma saw more and more money being spent in alternative healthcare. So Big Pharma said, move over. We're taking over. And so that's exactly what's happened in most of the supplement industry. And as a result, by and large, I would say at least 95% of what people are buying, being prompted by nothing more than a sense of urgency or guilt from some commercial, is absolute crap. Well, there's the station ID for those of you on the stream, a few of you. I want to keep, I don't know if well, I don't hear the news coming up at KTAR. So I will go on here with the second hour of the program. I got involved with the nutritional side. Oh, did you hear that? 8.8. An 8.8 earthquake there in the southern parts of Kamchatka. And it's in the Ring of Fire. And the news right now is saying that waves are being picked up in Hawaii and the West Coast from the tsunami effect of an 8.8. And an 8.8, remember the thing that hit Alaska was in 1954, I think, was a 9 point, I think it was a 9.0. And this is an 8.8. It's almost the same thing. And I don't know if you watch earthquakes like I watch earthquakes. And I'm just saying this to those of you on the stream. If you watch earthquakes like I do, and I have an app on my phone called Quake Watch. And it's just what has been happening recently. I'm going to pull it up here. In the number of big shakers. And so then all the aftershocks that have been going on, Russia, 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 Russia. I'm reading all of these. I don't know if you can. I'm going to show it to those of you who are on the stream. I know there's a light shining it, but you can see the size of the earthquakes and where they're located. I'm looking for something other than Russia, and I don't see it. Oh, South Sandwich Islands. This morning at 3:24 a.m. All the rest of these are all in the area of Kamchatka. So it's one thing to have aftershocks. It's another thing to have aftershocks that are between 5.5 and 6 and a little over 6. But there's the 8.9. My goodness, it's just offshore of Kamchatka. You know where that is. Just the far eastern, it almost looks a little like Florida, the far eastern part of Siberia, as it borders the Pacific Ocean. This little wing sticking down, kind of like Florida. And it's a very industrialized area of Russia. At 8.8, man, they must have been able to feel that as far away as Tokyo. I know this isn't the health show. I just find this fascinating that this happened. And earthquakes of that size kind of have one of two implications. One, it relieves stress that saves even bigger earthquakes or a multitude of the same rating, or it's a precursor to, in fact, something bigger. So I thought that was fascinating. I wanted to share that with you. I've been an earthquake watcher for a long time. Because I remember a time in my early days at KTalk that if we had a 6.0 earthquake somewhere on the earth, holy smoke, everybody. There was a 6.0 just 20 miles off the coast of New Zealand. I remember that because we hardly ever had a 6.0 on the Richter. And now they're commonplace. I set a filter on my Quake Watch program that it only alerts me to earthquakes of a certain Richter number or higher. Because there's thousands of earthquakes every day around the planet that are barely felt, but they're there as the plates are shifting and moving. But when you get an 8.8, you've got something to sit back and say, well, my goodness, what's next? So I'm going to get into the second hour of the program now. And for those of you at KTalk, I've been talking to my friends on the stream here about these earthquakes, especially this 8.8 that just hit Kamchatka, offshore, several miles offshore, and the fact that Hawaii is picking up the waves this morning from that tsunami. All right, back 50 years ago, when I was still doing my undergrad at BYU, Oh boy. Just waiting for the station ID. All right. I had a decision to make, and I went in the way of alternative healthcare and nutrition. There was a lady in my Sunday school class. I was the Sunday school teacher. And there was a lady in my Sunday school class, sat on the front row all the time, just loved my presentations. And I was, 23, 24. And we got to be good friends because she owned a health food store in Orem, on North State and Orem, Larson's Health Food Store. And I spent so much time in there learning from her that by the time I got to Palmer College, my understanding of nutrition far outweighed what I was being taught in nutrition classes at Palmer. And that was when health food stores were kind of poo-pooed and woo-woo stuff, and you outside of your medical doctor's office and the consultations you'd get with your medical doctor, there's no reason for health food stores. Just eat healthy. Well, that advice is pretty good. Eat healthy. Health food stores existed because people don't eat healthy. Health food stores exist today because people continue to not eat healthy. And so when I got involved with this, and this was the early 1970s, it was almost considered voodoo kind of stuff. And I remember she was kind of frowned on by members of the ward because of comments that she would make from time to time in a religious setting that related back to common sense healthcare. And I didn't like that. I didn't like the fact that she was quietly being persecuted. And as the years went by, up until the early 80s, 10 years later to the mid 80s, people began to market these stores more and more all the time. And by the mid 80s, the vitamin market was already growing, but it's nothing like you see today. Now, according to Statista, statista.com, they publish statistics. The global vitamin and mineral market is projected in 2025 to generate an astounding $34.24 billion. Vitamins and mineral, it's called the vitamins and mineral market, projected to generate almost $35 billion this year, which is a staggering number. And Big Pharma is aware of that. They don't want you spending that $35 billion on vitamins and minerals. But that's another issue. That's not why I brought this up. Why I'm bringing this up is because chronic diseases continue to climb right alongside the increasing purchasing of vitamins and minerals from health food stores or online or wherever else you get them. Why? Well, at one time, I thought the battle between, choosing healthcare versus modern medicine is ultimately a political act. But what we are witnessing today in the modern medicine movement is truly political, especially the steroid release of COVID. So the question is, are we allowing foreign interests to take over our vitamin industry in the name of profit while looking the other way? And I will submit the evidence I gave the last hour of the American Academy of Pediatrics. Are we going to abandon the latest scientific peer-reviewed studies that show the absolute danger of these things? or just opt to follow the American Academy of Pediatrics because they studied pediatrics, and a pediatrician knows more about the health of a young child than anybody else. You know, it's a sad state of affairs when greed infiltrates the very industry that people turn to because medicine failed them. Now, there's two different groups getting into alternative healthcare. Those who studied it and see that it's a viable alternative, and those that have been failed. Those that find medicine has failed them in their lung problems, blood problems, cancer problems, central nervous system problems, whatever. And then they, after that sense of failure, turn to alternative medicine. So what's missing here? People are taking more supplements than ever, and they're staying just as sick and getting sicker. I can't count the number of patients who have come into me when I start talking to them about supplementing, and all supplements didn't work for me. What supplements? Sometimes they can say what they are, often they can't. They tried them for a little bit, and then do you still have them at home? Oh, yeah, they're up there in the cabinet. Bring them in here and let me see them. Maybe I can tell you why they don't work. And like a lot of industries, the vitamin world began with very good intentions. But unfortunately, it has evolved in something else entirely. And today, the vitamin world is just another arm of the pharmaceutical complex, trying to take advantage of that $35 billion this year. Although the definition of a vitamin over the last several decades is consistent, it hasn't changed any. The quality and the origin of what's sold under the name of a vitamin varies wildly, and most consumers don't realize that many leading vitamin brands are owned by pharmaceutical giants. Nestle, Procter & Gamble, Pfizer, all have a very strong presence in the supplement market, either directly or through acquisitions. A company called Pure Encapsulations. That sounds like a good one to trust. They use the word pure. Encapsulations. You may or may not know what that word means, but it sounds good. Pure Encapsulations is widely used in naturopathic and functional medicine circles. The brand was acquired by Nestle Health Services in 2017. And while some see this as a positive development, thinking big food is finally embracing health, the reality is far, far more troubling. These companies which profit from processed foods, synthetic chemicals, pharmaceuticals, are now selling their health solutions. But are they supporting healing or just building another pipeline to long-term dependency? As I see vitamin commercials occasionally showing up, usually during news broadcast programs. I don't watch primetime TV. It has no interest for me. And, occasionally I'll watch a movie on Paramount or Apple or Max or Netflix or something like that. But I don't watch regular broadcast television outside of news and weather. There's nothing there for me. But what I do watch will have occasional vitamin commercials or concentrated fruits and vegetable commercials or things like this. And you know what I'm talking about. And when I see these things and I go to the internet and search them and I look at their ingredients, they're all synthetic. Now, take vitamin C. And this is one I use with my patients all the time. One of the most misunderstood of nutrients. And as taught by one of my mentors, Mark Anderson, out of Loveland, Colorado, is something he calls vitamin identity theft. Most supplement labels list ascorbic acid as vitamin C. The only problem with that is that ascorbic acid is not vitamin C. It's merely the outer shell of the vitamin C complex, this fibrous antioxidant wrapper that protects the vitamin complex on the inside, and at the very heart is a copper-based enzyme, tyrosinase, from being oxidized from the presence of oxygen. Ascorbic acid is just an antioxidant. It can be created in the laboratory with no fruit or vegetable anywhere near the process where most people think ascorbic acid comes from. Well, orange juice. No, unfortunately not. Well, strawberries. Unfortunately not. They have vitamin C complexes in them. And the vitamin C complex has this antioxidant, this fibrous antioxidant wrapper around it to protect it from oxygen. And it's just like, like the skin of an apple is a massive antioxidant barrier. And then you cut the apple open and you watch over the next several minutes and you see the effect of oxygen on the ingredients inside the apple as it slowly starts turning brown. You skin a banana and just sit there and watch it, and it starts going brown. That's the effect of oxygen. So Mother Nature wraps a lot of her food up in an antioxidant barrier that consists largely of ascorbic acid. Ascorbic acid is there not to provide you with an antioxidant. It's there to protect the food from oxidation. Now, when you isolate this one component of the vitamin C complex and call it vitamin C, you have now turned it into a synthetically derived pharmacological active compound. In other words, a drug, not a nutrient. Nutrients do not have a drug-like effect on your body. When I am talking to a patient who wants a food-based vitamin B, and we have 3 or 4 different versions of that in our clinic, depending on what part of the body we're trying to improve or sustain. There are different B collections. Occasionally they'll say, well, my vitamin D can give me a nice rush. Not D, C, or B. My vitamin B can give me a nice rush. And I say, well, you're probably talking about vitamin B3, niacin. And if you have the synthetic form, which is a drug, you can get from your vitamin B the drug that it is, a drug-like effect. And a drug-like effect would be that niacin rush. And you feel all pepped up. You might get a little flushing in the face, but you get all energized and you think, wow, that's the vitamin B for me. That's because it's a drug and you're having a drug-like effect. Food does not give you a drug-like effect. So when they ask me, will it give me the same effect as the vitamin B I'm taking now? And I said, well, it'll do a 10 times better job than what you're taking now, but you won't get a kick out of it because it's food. And it will supply the missing whole food vitamin B complex that you haven't been getting because you've just been taking one synthetic derivative off of a known nutrient, vitamin B, concentrated in such a form as to give you a kick so you think something good is happening. Then I would say something smart-assy like, have you ever tried cocaine? Cocaine is a drug, but it didn't start out as a drug. It comes from the cocoa plant in South America. If you're flying from Rio in Brazil to Santiago in Chile, you have to cross over the Andes. And because of the trade winds off the southwest coast of South America, there's a lot of wind that whips up over the Andes. And there's a section where it's a very rough ride. It can be a rough ride. And so they offer a tea that calms nausea before you pass over the Andes. And it's cocoa leaf tea. Now, if you take that and you process it and you concentrate it to a white powder, you end up with cocaine. It's the same thing with sugar cane that I mentioned earlier in the first show. If you chew sugar cane, it will not rot your teeth because it has all kinds of vitamins and minerals in it if it's grown in organic soil. It's very sweet, a lot of sugar there, but it's nutritious because it has vitamins and minerals and enzymes and coenzymes and other factors of food. But you take that same sugar cane and you start separating the parts, and you go after that one really juicy part and you concentrate it and process it, and you end up with a white powder called table sugar that's now a drug. It's no longer a nutrient, even though it started out that way. Well, I use vitamin C as an issue because most people will have some form of vitamin C around the house, but it's just ascorbic acid. And when you read most labels of vitamins, you'll see ascorbic acid listed in the other section simply because they throw it in there as a preservative for the rest of the drug mixture. But when you see it listed in super high amounts as vitamin C, 500 milligram, 1 gram, gigantic, orange flavored, with a pinch of rose hips, and I mean a pinch, and called vitamin C, considering the preservative power of ascorbic acid, and you're taking it by the gram or multiple grams, as Linus Pauling said, the discoverer of vitamin C did not agree with this whatsoever. Are you being preserved? Is this having a preservative effect on your body? Because that's what ascorbic acid is a preservative. You take large amounts, are you being preserved? Yeah, I wish. Because that is essentially what the whole food vitamin C complex does. It preserves the integrity of your connective tissue. That's what it does. It protects collagen. It protects collagen. The strength of collagen, the oxidation of collagen. And vitamin C has a second very important role. It improves the oxygen carrying capacity of hemoglobin. I've seen that with several patients who all of a sudden they're tired. They get up and walk across the room and they're tired, but there's no apparent heart issue going on. And I said, well, take some of this Cataplex C here, see what happens. Within just a few hours, more energy, simply because their blood is carrying more oxygen than it otherwise was. Now, here's the key truth. Your body is designed to absorb nutrients as whole complexes, found only in real food. When you strip these nutrients down to isolated parts, you create an imbalance, and the body robs its tissues to compensate for what's missing. Your body will try to construct the real vitamin when you give it a part of a vitamin, and it has to draw on stores that exist in the tissues to do that, leading to serious imbalances and deficiencies. So now where do these isolates come from? Like ascorbic acid. Because there's not an ascorbic acid factory sitting here in Salt Lake County. The Observatory of Economic Complexity confirms that China is the largest exporter of vitamin C and its derivatives, the same ascorbic acid that's found in most supplements on the market. Do you know how you can make ascorbic acid? All you need is a high-grade corn syrup and sulfuric acid. That's right. The effect of the sulfuric acid on the corn syrup produces ascorbic acid, which the FDA says is vitamin C. Now, the observatory, whoever heard of the Observatory of Economic Complexity? It's out there, and it has some interesting statistics, not the least of which the same ascorbic acid that's on your health food stores, shelves, comes from China. Now, Centrum, some of you take Centrum multivitamins. They got 5 or 6 different silvers and a bunch of different things. It's all produced by Pfizer. Centrum is produced by Pfizer that produces the COVID vaccine. That doesn't mean there's something wrong with Centrum because they also produce the vaccine, but they're manufactured in Suzhou, China. So when you go into the grocery store and you buy a bottle of Centrum multivitamins, it started out in chemical plants in Suzhou, China. And yet, in over nearly 50 years, probably over 50 years now, I've never met a single patient who reported long-term improvement in energy, tissue repair, sleep, immune resilience, sex, from taking Centrum, even if they've been taking it for decades. So Dr. Royal Lee, the founder of Standard Process, understood this very, very well. And he taught that real healing requires real food-based nutrients, not synthetic replicas. And that is what I have put into Dr. Jack's packs. Concentrations of this stuff. And for the heart support, for immune system support, for digestion support, I was able to help somebody with that yesterday. That they are battling over their PPIs, protein pump inhibitors. I talked about that last week. I talked about how PPIs work, how dangerous they are, because they lead to osteoporosis, muscle atrophy, and just general protein-based tissue degeneration. So here's how nutrient complexes relate to tissue repair. Connective tissue, which is bone, it's blood, it's lymph. Your blood is considered connective tissue, interestingly enough. So is your lymph. But bone, ligaments, cartilage, collagen tissues that hold the muscle cells together, these are all connective tissue. When you have a deficiency of the whole food vitamin C complex, you're going to have a breakdown in your connective tissue. And you're going to start having brittle bones, blood problems, lymphatic circulation problems, and a general breakdown of your muscle tissue because the collagen that is vitamin C dependent isn't doing the job because you don't have it. Epithelial tissue, like your skin and the linings of organs, is vitamin F complex dependent. Your muscle tissue, skeletal tissue, smooth muscle tissue. Skeletal tissue is the tissue that's attached to the skeleton, the muscles that get you up and move around. Smooth muscle tissue has movement of its own, such as peristalsis through the digestive system, but it's a different kind of muscle tissue. But both of them are dependent on the vitamin E complex, the whole vitamin E complex, not tocopherol oils. Tocopherol oils are not vitamin E. I don't care what the FDA says. Tocopherol oils are the antioxidant portion of the whole food vitamin E complex. Well, it looks like there's something coming across K-Talk. And then nerve tissue, your neurons. are vitamin B dependent. Whole food vitamin B. A good example of this is what happened, and this is in Army records, Army news records from the Korean War. And when there were prisoners of war that were put into North Korean concentration camps, they were fed white rice. White rice will lead to a serious vitamin B deficiency if that's all you're eating, because there's no nutrition in white rice other than some carbs and protein, a little bit of protein. But the vitamins and the minerals are gone because it was in the bran of the rice. Same as white bread. White bread has no real serious nutrition value to the human being, except for some carbohydrate and protein that's present, and the synthetic vitamins that are sprayed on it, the enriched. You don't need to enrich something Mother Nature made. But if you take something Mother Nature made and de-rich it, and then put it in the marketplace, you want to de-enrich it because you want to get rid of the parts that spoil. And then you enrich it with synthetics after that so you can say that it's a healthy product. That's what the food labeling laws allow in this country. So we have been trained, I think some would probably say brainwashed, to believe that high doses of isolated compounds are superior. I mean, in reality, these synthetic isolates stress the body rather than nourishing it. And when you see a label that says 500 milligrams or 1,000 IUs of something, you know that that company is labeling for the FDA. Because the indication of potency, whether it comes from food or a drug, is no indication as to how well it might be absorbed or how it might be utilized by the body. In other words, just because something looks good on the bottle, 500 milligrams of vitamin C right on the front label, and you read the ingredients and it's ascorbic acid. So you know it's not whole food vitamin C, it's just the antioxidant part of vitamin C. But because it says 500 milligrams, how can you know that there's 500 milligrams in that wafer? Nice, sweet, orange, tangy tasting because of what's been mixed into it to make you think you're eating dried orange juice or something. How do you know there's 500 milligrams? Because they put in 500 milligrams of ascorbic acid. When you read a vitamin bottle that says 100 milligrams of vitamin B1 thiamine, how can they say in each pill there's at least 100 milligrams? And there's more than that. There's probably 105 to 110, but they do that to make sure that there's 100. The only way they know that there's 100 milligrams of vitamin E in that capsule or pill is because they put it in there. Now, that may sound rather silly that I'm saying something like that, because the only way you can know that that's what's in there is you have a pre-mixed compound of something that you could measure, and then you stamp it into the pill. Now, when it comes to food, potency changes from one crop to the next. How much rain was there that year? What kind of fertilizer was in the soil? Did they rest those 40 acres for a year or two with a cover crop of clover to build the nitrogen back into the soil? Questions like this. Well, who knows? Who knows unless you seriously research and investigate that company? That's the thing I like about Standard Process. That is exactly what they do. And they have an almost 900-acre organic farm in Palmyra, Wisconsin, run by 5 people because of the sophistication of the farming equipment they get from Germany. 5 people can run 900 acres up to the point of harvest. Then once these things are harvested and are ready to be processed into pills, well, then there's other people involved with that. But just the running of that farm, 5 people can do it. So when I see a label, and I don't know why I'm compelled to do this, but often when I go to the grocery store, I'll take a little walk, whether Smith's or Harmon's. I don't see too many others because they're just not in my neighborhood. I'll take a little walk and see if there's anything new in the nutrition nutrition section of the pharmacy. Nutrition, kind of funny. In the drugs that are sold over the counter. In other words, they're in these vitamin bottles on the shelves of a pharmacy and looking for something new or whatever. And there's always the battle of the pills, the super hyper neutron mega dose vitamin C, or the hydro thrusting super dynamic vitamin B complex. And I just look at some of this marketing and that's why it works. Because if you think, if you saw a bottle of 50 milligram B1 and 500 or 100 milligram B1, and it's the same price, you would probably go for the 100 milligram. That's just human intuition. But what are you buying? You're buying a drug. And so when I see these large, super concentrated milligram or international units or whatever else, synthetics, one thing it doesn't say on the bottle is we have tested this drug on over 10,000 people, and these are the absorptive rates we've observed. You won't read that. Or we have tested this product on thousands of people, and this is the utilization rate we've discovered with this product on these people. You'll never see a study like that. Nobody has studies like that. But we know by observation and blood studies, blood work, that not everything you're taking into your gullet necessarily is absorbed. And not necessarily everything that does get absorbed is being utilized. And the only thing in the final analysis that's getting utilized anyway is real food. Anything else is going to end up being stored in your fat or your liver or joints or somewhere else if it's not food. So we are now in the era of widespread vitamin fraud. And the functional, naturopathic, integrative communities are not immune. And there's a lot of very well-meaning practitioners unknowingly prescribing products owned and manufactured by the very companies that profit from chronic illness, Big Pharma. And the more synthetic vitamins that we take, the more pharmaceuticals you're going to end up needing. That's the hack. The hack of the vitamin industry right there. And they know this. They're not getting into the vitamin industry because they feel guilty about all the drugs they sell. And so suddenly they should be doing something better by selling synthetic vitamins. No. You get a bottle of $25 vitamin B synthetics. There's less than 50 cents of material inside that bottle. And they're selling it for 25 bucks. Who wouldn't be involved in a trade deal like that? And then the more of this stuff you take, in the long run, the more pharmaceuticals you're going to end up needing. We evolved on this planet, and I don't mean from the monkey. I mean just from one 50,000 year period to the next. From eating food. not pill popping. And healing happens when we return to nature, not when we mimic it with industrial substitutes. Supplementation is bridging the nutrition gap, not replacing whole food nutrition, just bridging the gap, because unless you absolutely go out of your way to secure the healthiest food for your family, and you're not going to do it in the grocery stores, there's still going to be some lack. There's going to be some vital ingredients in building tissue, repairing tissue, healing tissue, that's not going to show up in that box, a bag, or a can. And so I tell my patients, you cannot win the healthcare game without supplementing. Now, if you live on some remote farm in Montana, untouched by chemicals from the sky, untouched by neighboring pesticides, herbicides, sprayed year-round, and it still has black, loamy soil 2 and 3 and 4 feet deep, with all kinds of residue from buffalo poop, and you tend the soil with clean water, heritage seeds, you might be the exception to this. And the animals that you consume live on that beautiful green grassy fields that surround your organic farm, and eat only grass and drink only clean mineralized water coming down from glaciers, mineral-rich glaciers. Well, the minerals aren't in the glaciers. The minerals are in the water coming down the mountainside from the melting glacial water. Then that might be the exception. And when I find something better than what I sell in my clinic, I will be on their doorstep tomorrow. And if you're looking for real nourishment, you have to choose whole food complexes, not synthetic fragments in a glossy bottle with a superpower big number on the label. Now, we have a test called the nutrition analysis. It's at the homepage of forbiddendoctor.com. I think it might be under, I think it's one of the main panels you can click on, nutritional assessment. There's no charge for that. It's a couple hundred questions. No obligation, no charge, just fill it out. You'll get a email back telling you what we think of your symptoms. That's what the nutritional assessment is. It's all the 9 systems of the human body and questions relative to those systems that would indicate some deficiency if you suffered from those particular symptoms. Over 200 questions, an accurately filled out survey. You might answer 12 to 15 of the questions on there. We've had people answer every single one of them. Well, that tells me nothing. We've had people answer 50 to 100 of the questions. That tells me nothing. You only answer the question that's, oh my goodness, that's me. Greasy foods upset. Oh, that's me. That kind of a thing. Because most of the questions have nothing to do with you. No charge for that at forbiddendoctor.com. Now, I hope I wasn't too preachy. I've been accused of getting awfully preachy when I talk about this stuff, but I'm passionate about it. And when I see the changes in the heart sound recorder, and I just upgraded the whole system, with our heart sound recorder is back up and operating with a great upgrade. And what this thing is basically auscultation, listening to the heart. The microphone is placed over the 4 valves. And its performance, you see marching across the screen. And from that, we can tell a lot of things about the heart, things that an EKG will not tell you. And some of the best cardiac research that I was looking at recently said the only definitive way to really interpret what the heart is doing is auscultation, the old stethoscope. But most young and new doctors are not trained in auscultation. They're just, here's what a bad murmur sounds like. Listen to this. This is the mitral valve regurgitating. Listen to the sound. We did this in school. We had this little black box that had all these different heart sounds recorded in it. And we would put on the stethoscope, and we'd put the stethoscope on the speaker portion of the box at very low volume, mind you, and go through the different types of murmurs. And some of them are very distinctive, some of them are difficult to interpret. But to this day, that is still the best way to diagnose what's going on with a heart. And that's what the heart sound recorder does. And it takes about a half an hour to 45 minutes to do the test. And then I sit down with Trudy and we go through the results and we show you, here's what your heart's doing. Here's what you need to take if you want to improve its performance. And some of them just say, okay. Others say, well, how do you know? I say, well, I'm going to give you a half a dozen of these pills and I want you to chew them up right now. They don't taste like chocolate-covered almonds. But chew them up, create a little slurry in your mouth, let that slurry hang around underneath your tongue on the bottom of your mouth for about a minute or so, and then here's some water to wash it down. And we're going to wait about 20 minutes and retest you. 9 times out of 10, there is an immediate improvement in the function of the heart. Because no organ responds faster to improved nutrition than the heart, just as conversely, no organ suffers faster from malnutrition than the heart. Ergo, the number one killer in America today. Not because of cholesterol, not because of atherosclerosis or arteriosclerosis, but because of malnutrition that causes those things to happen. The average American is slowly starving their heart to death. I have lost 5 people that I know of since last summer to heart attacks, too young to have died from a heart attack. In fact, I'm giving a lecture on that tonight to a select group of doctors who've signed up to. I was asked to speak on this to some of my colleagues because they want to know why some prominent NUCA doctors have recently died from heart attacks. One in their late 50s, the other in their late 60s. So I will be speaking. It's not open to the public. I'm sorry. It's a closed group of NUCA doctors who want to know why this happened. Because of malnutrition. The number one cause of cancer, malnutrition. Eating stuff you should not be eating and not eating things you should be eating. Number one cause of heart disease, malnutrition. Eating things you shouldn't be eating, not eating things you should be eating. Number one cause of diabetes, malnutrition. Eating things you shouldn't be eating, not eating things that you should be eating. Right on down the list. And the greatest tragedy in healthcare today, as Dr. Lee said, is that we treat those deficiencies with poisons, drugs, thinking that somehow the administration of this drug will make up for years of malnutrition. The best news of all is all of that can be turned around by improved nutrition. And that's what all my podcasts are about. That's what these radio shows are about, to get that across. And that's what my Dr. Jack's packs are about. People will come in and then say, well, I heard Dr. Jack on the radio about the heart. What does he suggest? Well, it's right here in this box. If you buy these 3 things separately, it costs this. But if you buy them together in Jack's pack, there's a 15% discount. They feed the heart. They stop inflammation of the heart, and they feed the myocardium with food specifically derived from Mother Nature to feed the myocardium. Well, we got kids going back to school here in a few weeks, and they're going to be around a bunch of vaccinated kids, or they're going to be around a bunch of kids who are sneezy and snotty. And well, here we have the immune pack for children. Just three things at a discount price. Well, should they start it when they go to? No, they should start it now because of all the summer stuff they've been eating. Yeah, they need to start building that immune system now before they get around those sick vaccinated kids. My husband is having severe digestion, and the doctor wants to put him on a drug for acid indigestion. Is there something you can do for this? Yeah, it's the digestion support. Happens to be four things. It makes sure your gallbladder is releasing enough bile for fats. There's digestive enzymes here to break down the proteins. And there's something here to rebuild the proper flora in your colon, to break down whatever carbohydrates reach down there that have a tendency to feed adverse bacteria. Four things. Do you have something? I feel really good. I feel healthy, but I heard Dr. Jack on the radio. Is there something that can help me stay this way? Oh, yeah, the foundation pack. Four things: vitamins, minerals, oils, and support for the hypothalamus, pituitary, thyroid glands, and adrenal glands. All of those things. There's four things in this pack. You take them on a daily basis. As all of this stuff, within 2-3 weeks, you will notice you feel different. Why? Because it's food. They aren't synthetic chemicals from China. Well, my wife is considering hormone replacement therapy. And she doesn't know if she ought to do something orally or she should use some creams what are her symptoms? Well, postmenopausal. It's not always postmenopausal. Sometimes it's premenopausal. There's vaginal dryness. There's just emotional changes. I don't want to use some vernacular words here, but so I'm not going to. But she's not the same sweet, kind little thing that she was before menopause. And she wanted me to ask, well, why didn't she come? Well, she didn't want to. She wanted me to ask you, is there something you can do? Yeah, it's a female support pack. Four things. Food for her ovary. Does she still have ovaries? Good. But this thing still applies if she doesn't. But there's food for the ovary, so the ovary produces properly the hormones that it's supposed to. There's support here for the liver, so that the liver will be able to clean out extra estrogen that she does not need. And there's wheat germ oil that has the component of the vitamin complex that is the precursor to sex hormones. And then occasionally a lady will ask about her husband's ED, or a man will go into the room with me by himself with me and talk about ED. Yeah, we've got something that can help with that. Depends on how bad it is and how long it's been around. But all of these things seriously stem from malnutrition, eating the standard American diet. So you're missing the trace minerals. You're missing the necessary enzymes. And you're missing the food-based vitamins. And the body can only last so long in a malnourished state before things start breaking down. And your body simply cannot take that 48-ounce Mountain Dew and build strong bones, or a healthy ovary, or a healthy thyroid, or healthy heart valves out of it. It can't take that sandwich and potato chips and Slurpee drink at 7-Eleven for lunch because you're in a hurry and feed the brain or feed your kidneys. It just can't do it. A lot of this depends on the health and nutritional status of your mother while you were developing inside of her, because you're going to pick up most of that from her. A developing human baby is the ultimate parasite. And it will rob, it will beg, borrow, steal, and rob every last little nutrient from mom that it can get to build its own body. It shows no mercy to mom. And when you have a malnourished grandmother who produced a malnourished daughter, who is now a mother producing a malnourished baby, who is now in the 4th generation of malnourishment, it just contributes to the vast percentage of chronically ill children in this country. And again, you're not trapped by this. It's not like you're in some kind of nutritional prison you can't get out of. As patients tell me, do I have to take these pills all the time? No, just eat better food. If you will eat better food, you don't have to take these supplements. Now, I know that's different than what I just said a moment ago, that you can't get by without them, but I gave you the Montana exception. But you can take a lot less of them if you'll improve your diet. I have a teenager now taking liver twice a week. And this teenager had a bad heart scan, but now is eating a 4-ounce portion of liver twice a week. Does he like it? Well, I don't think he's wild about it, but I got his attention and he's feeling better. More energy, more strength. All right, that's pretty well going to do it for the show. We're going to be coming to the national broadcast at K-Talk. And this is Wednesday. I guess this is it for the week. I've got some things in store that I want to do. I know I say this every week, but I'm getting closer to better improved broadcast on the stream. And I will be bringing on guests. And if things work out the way I want, I may even be able to get it done this weekend. They'll be pre-recorded. I cannot do a live guest interview on the stream and K-Talk at the same time. There's just wild, uncontrollable feedback. It won't work. Tried that with Harley and it didn't work. So that'll do it for this show. If you want to come to the stream, it's just simply youtube.com/ I think it's on YouTube, I think it's Dr. Jack Stockwell. And on X is Forbidden Doctor for the health show. For the other shows, Monday and Tuesday, it's youtube.com/ Global Affairs Unfiltered. Yeah, that's what it is, Global Affairs Unfiltered. On X, it's Global Affairs UF. And Yvonne, if you're listening, I think we got you hooked up yesterday, but I think this is it. So, no, it wasn't. I never know the timing here at the end of the program because it keeps getting changed all the time, but I'm going to stop the recording at K-Talk right there. And then, the problem now is I don't know whether that was dumb. I don't know what's happening at K-Talk. So I'm going to end there. And for those of you on the stream, before I look too terribly in, there it is. We're through at K-Talk. For those of you on the stream, and thank you for your participation. If you will like, subscribe, get these passed around so we can build the audience. We're almost up to 1,000. Last I heard, we're approaching 1,000 subscribers to the health program. I would like to see 100,000. I hope that doesn't sound greedy. I'd like to see 100,000. So I'll see you all Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday of this coming week. Keep your wits about you and be careful out you. Be careful. And don't accept what I've told you based on what I've told you. I want you to examine and research these things for yourself. I want you to own these things for yourself. Then it will matter. So I will see you all later. Thank you for your